Hello, welcome digital ship friends. Today we continue our conversation about the future of maritime satellite communications. We'll discuss the insatiable demand for data via satellite, the tipping point, with our two guest speakers, Jon Harrison, who is the Vice President and General Manager responsible for Europe, Middle East, Africa at Intellian Technologies, and Joshua Flood, Senior Research Consultant at Valour Consultancy. This webinar is sponsored by Intellian. The speakers will share their thoughts, and then you'll have enough time to engage and ask your questions. And we're starting with some food for thought from Carl Jeffrey, founding editor of Digital Ship.
Okay, so our purpose today is to help you as someone working in the maritime digital technology to get a better idea of where maritime satellite communications is going and what your options are going to be, and explain some of the technologies and what they can do. So you're probably aware there's a lot of investment happening in satellite communications. You've heard about companies like OneWeb, SpaceX, O3B, also Inmarsat's launching satellites, and a lot more. And in general, it's very good news for shipping because you get more bandwidth, more choice, and less cost and higher quality, but it may also mean some changes. So as you probably noticed, this satellite communications infrastructure isn't launched purely for the purpose of the maritime industry. One reason it's being launched is that the world of telecoms in general, that's for the whole telecoms market, has a very big concern that maybe the fiber optic networks we have won't be able to carry all our data, and we can't put fiber everywhere. So that might be part of the reason why companies like Amazon and Facebook are investing in satellite networks. They can see that terrestrial communications are going towards a point where it just gets full, which we're called a tipping point. So that's the reason today's webinar is called the insatiable demand for data via satellite, the tipping point. So while in shipping, we're getting promised more bandwidth, more choice, less cost and higher quality, you might find yourself sharing this with other customers than you're used to. And there may also be some negative impacts. So as just an example of where there may be a negative impact in the next 10 years, if you think about satellite broadcast TV, if you get that onto your ships. So if on land, everyone's going to move to getting TV streaming over the internet, maybe companies will stop investing in the broadcast satellite infrastructure. So reasons like this is probably helpful for you to keep up to speed with the different satellite communications and technologies and your LEOs and MEOs and the pros and cons, so you know what your options are as things change. So that's the theme today. We've got two speakers. Jon Harrison is Vice President and General Manager EMEA of Intellian Technologies, and Josh Flood is Senior Research Consultant at Valour Consultancy. They're both based in the UK. Jon has been working in maritime satcoms for 25 years, including at Renaissance Cruises, and Intellian Technologies is one of the biggest satellite communications antenna companies. And Joshua Flood runs the Maritime Research Division at Valour Consultancy, which is specializing in satellite technologies, IoT, mobile and wearable technologies. They're going to give their presentation jointly, and there should be plenty of time for questions. So you can load the questions up in the Q&A box at any time. And I'd like to invite Jon to start his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carl. Great to be here, guys. I hope that what we not only present but discuss is informative and also a bit of fun. I think that's really important. I'm gonna put my presentation into two sections, something I feel very passionate about. One is the demand for data, the insatiable demand for data, and what the drivers are behind it. I'm sure many of you know it's happening. And of course, how does it affect the maritime user? And also a little bit of history of satellite and where we're heading, etc. There's lots of buzzwords out there. And hopefully we can start to dispel the myth, or at least give you some education from our perspective, at least. And Josh, well, Josh is independent. He can keep me honest. So if I stray off the beaten path, I'm sure he'll beat me down with his beautiful new haircut that he's obviously done for today.
Two purposes for this is just to show my new haircut and to ensure you walk the line, Jon.
Exactly. Now, this presentation is normally much longer to get the point across. So what we've done is we've actually got a nice video. It's 3 minutes. Hopefully you can hear it. It's an insight into a little bit of history about cable infrastructure, all of the fiber globally, And then I think it sets the tone for, the data demand and what is really behind it. So bear with me. I will start this video, which I love, by the way. It was written in 2015. It is still relevant today, and then we'll go from there. Okay.
We don't see your slides yet, Jon.
Oh, my mistake.
Please share your screen.
Okay, you good?
We see the presenter screen, so switch the screens, please.
There we go. How's that?
Perfect.
So let's go.
We never stop hearing about how the internet's in the cloud, but really, it's in the ocean. About 300 undersea fiber optic cables are responsible for 99% of international data traffic. It's basically the same way we connect to each other in a single country, except underwater instead of underground. They transmit PewDiePie from Europe to America, and they connect stock traders in New York and London. And these cables, placed by private companies, are the backbone of the internet. But if you held one in your hand, it'd be no bigger than a soda can. There are just a few layers of protection from the water, including petroleum jelly. Yes, your internet is covered in Vaseline. They're vulnerable to earthquakes. At least a few times, confused sharks have bitten them. But many cables are beneath sea life because in some places they go as deep underwater as Mount Everest is high. Ships lower a plow that digs a tiny groove in the ocean floor, lay in the cable, and it's naturally buried by sand thanks to the ocean's current. And that process, it's both stunningly simple and mind-blowingly complex, is responsible for making the internet a truly global network. It's an idea that's audacious and crazy, and you think it has to be cutting edge, and it is, but it's also been going on for 157 years. Electric telegraphs have been around for a long time. Experiments in the early 1800s connected two ends of a garden using a clock that revealed letters. Then they moved on to two neighborhoods to help signal trains, and then multiple cities thanks to a network of railroad lines. Underwater submarine cables were an obvious next step, so they played around. Instead of petroleum jelly, the first ones were coated with exotic tree sap to protect them from the water. And though the undersea cables came in spurts, one of the first ones was knocked out of commission by a fishing boat. By 1858, they reached around the Atlantic and across the world. And that's how it's kind of gone since, laying cables that circle the Earth's oceans. The cables are...
Oh. I think the video is cut short, guys, but I think you kind of get the point realistically. It was about maybe 3 or 4 seconds to the end. But I think the point is that however we like it, we completely live in a connected world. Everything around it is connected. And actually the data that is flown over these connections is becoming such a valuable commodity. I think personally, if we have data, we can do so much. If we don't have data, we're pretty much in the dark. And I think getting the data from A to B is equally valuable. We saw in the video, and we can see in the screen in front of us, that actually 99% of all of our data flows over this very impressive fiber optic infrastructure. And I think, we also need to kind of, label that to the maritime user as well. Even though a vessel isn't plugged in, the data goes via satellite, absolutely. And I think that's a beautiful thing. But the reality is at some point that data will pass over this network. And potentially, if the data is growing so much and there is risk of these cables potentially becoming damaged or we can't get enough in, then we could head to what's called the tipping point. I mean, Josh, you got any point of view in terms of this infrastructure, this very incredible infrastructure that's out there?
Yeah, I've got a few things. So I think one of the big points is people don't realize about these subsea cables infrastructures. So a couple of months ago, I was on holiday in Scotland, up in the west coast, past Liverpool. I was on this beach called Achmelvik. If the attendees want to check where that is. And I was paddleboarding around. I could see one of these thick black cables going out from the edge of the shore, and it must have been supplying connectivity to the Western Hebrides right out there. So it's quite a common place. And then there's the two actually other major points for this. Like a few years ago, I remember in the Times, they reported, two reporters, Gabriel Pogrom and a chap called Mark Hookham, and they managed to gain access to a landing station where all these internet cables were stored. They didn't have to pass any fences. They were just basically out in the middle of these farms, and they're hoping no one would take notice. So from a security standpoint, this actually has some worry. And I think from some of our earlier discussions, John, you mentioned this to me, talking about the technology of these cables haven't changed very much over the last 50 years. And I remember reading a book called Flash Boys. It was about the speed of connection between the stock market, stock exchanges. And they were trying to lay these cables, and they were going through like mountains, they were cutting through farmers' fields, trying to create the straightest path possible. And from an environmental standpoint, this is quite archaic, and it's something we're not going to be able to do anymore.
Let's just hope nobody starts cutting those cables then, huh? I mean, you know, we've been talking about, I mean, we all know data. We know data is all around us. We talk about data in the form of megabits and gigabits, and of course terabits are, you know, around us too, right? But it's the zettabytes of data that are actually flowing around the world, and that's how we measure and quantify the data. And actually, as a checkpoint, I wrote this presentation, you know, 8 years ago originally. Of course, it's been modified and upscaled and been more, you know, more relevant. But realistically, we didn't even predict back then how much data was going to flow, right? And again, I turn back to the cables. If the cables are becoming congested, we all have internet rage from time to time, right? My kids have internet at home. If it goes off, same for the Maritime user, if the terminals go down, it's hugely frustrating because it becomes part of our infrastructure. We like to be connected. So just imagine the scene if we have global internet rage, right? Just imagine if it gets so severe. And you can see the chart in front of us, the growth rate of the data. Now, I personally think that's very, very conservative, to be honest with you, because if I look at the data prediction back in 2008, when I first started looking at this, right, it's outstripped. And we haven't even invented things that are going to, you know, obviously we like to make stuff and we like to create things that are going to attach to the Internet of Things, of course, which is a famous buzzword. But I think the reality is we're kind of heading into kind of some dangerous territory. To give you a checkpoint, what is it? What is a zettabyte? Okay, what is a zettabyte? Well, a zettabyte is 1 trillion gigabytes. It's 1 trillion gigabytes, and that's immense. To put it into another perspective, it's about 350 billion DVDs. Okay, so we're talking about these zettabytes of data that are flowing globally, that are increasing globally. I mean, that's vast, Josh, right? What do you think about 350 billion DVDs, 1 zettabyte?
Well, I was actually looking through exactly how much a DVD is, and I went, of course, straight off to the new James Bond movie, and I was like, so how much data is the new James Bond movie in 4K? And that's still the equivalent of, I don't know, 25 million copies of the new James Bond film, which is literally almost as long as Lord of the Rings.
Which I haven't seen yet, by the way, but yeah, that's a good checkpoint, you know, exactly. I mean, another way of looking at it, right? How long did it take us as a global nation to use a zettabyte? Okay, how long did it take us of all the internet traffic everywhere in the world from any source to any destination and back? How long did it take us to use 1 single zettabyte of data? Okay, well, the internet, very, very, very famous year, certainly for me and certainly for Josh, and I'll explain in a second. The internet was born 1st of January 1983. I think that's relevant to you that year, right?
It is indeed the year of my creation.
The year of your birth. The year of your birth. And you know what? We use 1 zettabyte of data by September 19th, 2016. Or in layman's terms, 34 years to use a zettabyte of data. So we're talking about zettabytes of data per month. And it'll get down to per week. So if we use 1 zettabyte over 34 years, I think it's pretty much clear to say that actually the data consumption globally is going up. And I think that is definitely going to be a trend that will impact in a positive way, eventually, the Maritime user as well. So, you know, what is this data? You know, what is all this data? And to be fair, I'm sure everybody's sick of hearing the word big data, right? So I am too, right? but we have to address it, because if we're trying to understand where we're heading and how we can resolve it, we need to understand where it's coming from. Well, I like to put it into two buckets, Josh, to be fair. Big data, obviously surveillance, high quality video is taking a lot of that data, that big data up, and it's really quite hard to quantify which slice of that pie that global security, military, government data is taking. And that's fine, we leave that alone. But what we can look at, which is definitely the insatiable demand, all around us, is what I call the small data, which is, basically the connected devices. Okay, we dream stuff up, right? You and I were talking about, the connected watch, Josh. I think it's a Watch Series 7 that's come out right now, and their play is about health and fitness. And we've seen all around us that there seems to be, some constraints of getting access to a doctor these days. So, we have a desire to improve our quality of life. And there's many parts of the world that are absolutely disconnected, and they will come online too, and they will add to that data demand. But realistically, it's a real positive. And whether we're on a vessel or a plane or a train or at home, we now kind of expect things to work better. And that's where the constraint potentially could come in. So this Internet of Things, us, as a viable commodity, we're driving that forward. I mean, any comments there, Josh?
Well, I was going to say, what's really fascinating is talking about that past slide, looking at the Zetabyte data and how it's increasing on a yearly basis. And if you take that to the maritime sector, and I was speaking to some of the satellite operators, and I'm not too sure if the audience is aware of Moore's Law. So it's one of the old CEOs of Intel. And basically, Moore's Law is essentially the processing power of a silicon semiconductor chip increases every 18 months. Also becomes less expensive over that period. I'm not going to delve into that. They were making a comment, they're starting to see data consumption per vessel increase in correlation to the Moore's Law, which is astounding. And I think in May, it was May this year, EMEA were talking about FX, and they were just coming up to the point of having 11,000 vessels on there. And they were saying, we've actually seen in 15 months data treble. So per vessel, wow. It's probably a predominantly merchant customer base. They were seeing it increase from about 3 gigabytes per day to over 9 gigabytes.
So the merchant customer is asking for 3 times more these days. Is that what you're saying in the last 18 months?
Yeah, so from the beginning of 2020 to it must have been March this year, it is trebled on Fleet Express, the data consumption. And then talking about, so why is this happening? And you were talking with the past slide, talking about IoT. And one of the points I was going to say is, look, a lot of people, when they think of IoT, they're going to think about various types of sensors or assets, or sensors on assets, I should say. But what we're seeing an increasing amount of is how we interact, and video becoming a big point of this. And not many people, but probably under the radar is in terms of video communication and video surveillance. Around the world, lots of nations now have a lot more video that's being transferred around. And also probably one of the biggest drivers for why so much more data is being consumed per vessel is people indulging, well, I shouldn't say indulging, but using, because it's so much more useful, isn't it? You can gauge people's reaction.
I think you're right. If we can do it, and obviously the issue is the cost, but if it can be done at the right price and it's beneficial from a crew welfare, mental health perspective, on an enterprise perspective, then why not? And I think that's the point. Here's a really good slide. This is my favorite slide of the entire presentation, right? So this I mean, you've seen this many times, Josh, but I've got to explain this. This is
I'm looking forward to seeing this.
This is global data use. Global data use. Now, global data use is land, aviation, maritime. So it's all pulled into a big pot. But the habits actually of what we see from a land perspective, what we do in our daily lives when we're home, etc., are starting to wash over to the maritime user. Of course, at a slower pace, but still, you've got to have some relevance between this data and what we do on board, right? So, there's a lot there in the slide. As a reminder, this is every 60 seconds. So every 60 seconds, globally, we upload 500 hours of YouTube data. Fine, that's a lot, absolutely, yeah. So that's fine. Every 60 seconds, not a year, not a month, not a week, every minute. 69 million WhatsApp messages sent. I mean, that's staggering. That's now. I mean, to be honest with you, we captured this data about a month ago. I would imagine that's probably, gone up significantly. 28,000 Netflix subscribers. I think that's going to be a very, very important discussion point for the crew members. There is definitely a shift in the attitude of the satellite operator. There's less money in broadcast and there's more money in data. And so potentially, again, I'm just speaking from my point of view, hypothetically, if there's no business case, why would you continue to launch broadcast satellites where people are streaming? And potentially that might impact the maritime user. Again, just speaking hypothetically, right? And for a bit of fun, 2 million Tinder swipes. That's a lot of swipes to the left or the right. So you can see where this is heading. So again, reminder, this is every 60 seconds. Sorry, Josh, go ahead.
I have one question, John. With my new haircut, am I a left or a right? Which way am I swiping?
That's too personal. Too personal. Yeah, too personal. But I'm sure it could be in the poll. It could be in the poll.
No, let's not put this on the poll.
But one of the points is obviously, what is the COVID effect, right? We've all lived this, and we continue to live this, pretty horrendous, situation. I don't want to go into the details of that, but the reality is, it's kind of given us a kick up the backside. This COVID effect. It's kind of, we were, discussing this particular webinar ourselves with Carl and Veda, and the reality is that before COVID, I would have picked up the phone and had a discussion. You and I, Josh, we have video calls all the time right now, right? Not because we feel it's the right thing to do, because we've learned we gain rapport. When we can see each other, we can actually, non-verbal communication is 82%, right? So if we can facilitate it, and I think that is now becoming the norm. Again, it's only my interpretation, my point of view, that is becoming the norm for us globally, right? So if that is something we're used to and is fundamental to our existence and our mental being, then why would that not wash over to the seafarer, for example, right? Now that's a big challenge because data has a price point. But if there's a desire there, when Apple created the iPad, it came out and what is this? What is this? What do we do? And now, like I said to you, I've got like 20 in my house, they're all over the place. And I use them. So, definitely this is how we are inventing things that are going to benefit society. But the COVID effect is definitely, put that on charge. 76%, as you can see, an increase in smartphone usage, laptop usage has gone up. Gaming, I thought would be higher, to be fair, but still, it's definitely increased. I mean, again, any comment on that observation?
I think the key point here is the importance people's smartphones and play within our lives. And you're starting to see like a much more stronger smartphone hub solution where different wearable techs are spoken off from the smartphone and how integral they're becoming and developing those use cases. So sometimes it's a case of we will put this forward and we will just see how it will go. And then people will come up for reasons or you find uses for it. And it's just about being intuitive and into, I think that's the term, yeah.
Well, I think this is a pretty decent slide that I'm going to hurry through because I'm pretty time conscious. But in 2010, the average, person globally had 2 devices, right? So, I was presenting this in Barcelona a couple of weeks ago, and I said to the audience, has anybody not got a smartphone? Because we all have smartphones pretty much these days, and then by 2015, 4 devices per person. And by 2020, last year, the average was 7 devices. Now that's not 7 smartphones, that would be bonkers, right? But the whole point is that's me personally having 7 of my devices, my watch, my smart trainers, my fridge, my bits and bobs. And that's just a trend. This is just data we're presenting, and I think, like I said earlier, the stuff we haven't even invented yet. You and I spoke yesterday. There's probably going to be something extremely defining coming that is going to drive up this IoT stuff, which again is going to contribute towards this fiber slowdown, potentially a bottlenecking, and again looking at new technologies and new ways to make sure that we don't have that problem could be key, right? This is your slide, Josh. You want to explain it? I mean, this is pretty intense.
Yeah, brilliant. So this is just essentially mapping out the number of vessels, commercial vessels with VSAT around the world, and how much it's increased over the last few years. And just to give the audience a little bit of a back view, 2010, 2011, this number was about 10,000. So it's trebled over the last 10 years. And essentially, so just taking into, let's say 2021, by the end of the year, we project there's going to be around about 37,300 vessels, roughly. This is from our last year's report, so I'll be updating it later this year. So about 50% of those are going to be commercial merchant vessels, and then a good chunk of it is going to be offshore, the leisure market, and then the passenger and then fishing markets. And basically what's driving that growth is new build vessels coming into the market that are having VSAT on there. So I like to give this example. The life of how the other half lived. Jeff Bezos with his new Y721 super luxury yacht that's $500 million will be released next year, I think. So that will be, it'll have probably multiple.
And didn't he attend COP26?
Yeah, there's loads of them. The names are so fascinating. And then also, before I go off tangent, and then you have numerous vessels, for example, Evergreen will have ordered some, Maersk, CMG, CMA, CMG, CGM. So yeah, and then also you've got the strategy of upgrading vessels with MSS, L-band connectivity to VSAT. And this is what's driving the growth at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, speaking to some of the service partners, the SLAs have all been adjusted. That was something that they saw during the COVID, for example. I mean, like you said, threefold in some cases. And I think as we get used to this cool connectivity, which can bring some incredible health, safety, green, operational advantages to the ship owner and the crew, I think if it's possible, why not do it? You know, yeah, we are all in a very, very conservative world. In this case, in maritime is very conservative, but I think, you know, things are changing around us, and why not adopt it?
Well,
and this is the sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
I was just going to say, one of the points was, look, we've got some of the capacity and people are thinking about, look, how can we use it? And there's a case of, right, there's potential this capacity could run out, but look, we've got some new opportunities coming online later in the year, which we're going to go on to. And where it was only a use case simply for getting VSAT, I need to provide some sort of resemblance of communication for my crew. Now it's like, right, what can we really do with this? There's a
exactly
to better our business.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry, Joe.
So anyways, let's get to the point, the tipping point. and this is hypothetical, but there's two camps. There's analysts are saying we're going to head into some hot water. And basically, what is a tipping point? Well, potentially this insatiable data demand. And again, as a reminder, whether we're on a vessel or a plane or a train or wherever, if we have connectivity, we do use this fiber optic cable. You can't get away from it. It's only 1% of communication is not using this fiber cable, right? So potentially the demand, which we've seen over the first part of this presentation, is bonkers. It's absolutely crazy. And I think that's going to go up and up and up and up and up. And it's cool. It's really cool stuff. It's really benefiting society, and the stuff that, you know, the new operators are doing, and Inmarsat and OneWeb and SES is really going to connect people, certainly in the rural areas too. So it's fantastic. Potentially, we'll hit this point where we get this mass internet choking, right? So basically everything slows down, not just regionally, everything. So our experience, our ability to transfer high-speed data can be an issue. So, you know, the potential of this mesh network, okay, driven by this big data and this little data and these things we invent, and health and safety and greener environment, all these things are converging, potentially could give us a bit of a headache, right? So we call it the tipping point. Okay, again, there is multiple camps on that. Some are saying it's never going to happen because of certain protocols that have been developed in the internet connected world. But you know what? Because of all this, and because of there's a desire to improve, there is definitely this new era of evolution, revolution in the satellite space. And you know, whether we like it or not, in the communication world, and I say the communication world, satellite has never really been used as a primary form of communication. It's been a backup, or it's been secure, and it's certainly hard to reach areas like maritime, etc. Right? I mean, any feedback from you there, Josh, in terms of that? You good?
I think we covered it really well there.
So, bit of history. We've spoken about the problem, the data demand. Let's talk about our industry. Okay, so 1945, an absolute legend, Arthur C. Clarke, decided to have this crazy idea of terrestrial relays, which are basically mirrors in space. 1957, satellites were launched. I'm not sure if that's Sputnik, to be fair, but it was one of the first ones anyways. And his vision was realized. 1964, that's a pretty important date. This was the very, very first VSAT terminal onto a vessel. In fact, I actually know one of the gentlemen that was involved in that. I think he's called Paul Fenner-Roberts from Crestcom, but a different topic anyways. In 2020, it's what we live and breathe. We are very much in a connected world. The maritime user gets, you know, good access to data, etc., etc. We're all using a particular form of network, okay? But we've also seen lots of buzzwords around us, okay? And I think our duty today, Josh, is to explain some of those buzzwords, right? You know, we hear LEO and MEO and GEO and HEO. And, you know, as a checkpoint, it's all fantastic. It's all extremely positive. But the reality is, okay, geostationary is very, very proven. There's a certain distance away from the Earth's surface. LEO, which is, you know, predominantly the OneWeb, which is the OneWeb network as example. There's others, the Iridium, etc. They are sitting very, very close to the Earth's surface. So of course, it's less far for the data to travel, potentially low latency. Again, there's pros and cons in each way. We are not lobbying for anything in particular. We are just saying it's a revolution and it's really cool, right? To be fair. Then you've got the MEO, SES an example. SES mPower is going to be MEO based. And then, of course, you've got the cool stuff that's happening with GEO, which, of course, is Avanti, Eutelsat, Inmarsat. And Inmarsat, I've got another play, an additional play, which is the HEO. So those guys are particularly creative. But this is really awesome. But it's not new, okay? The idea isn't new. The idea has always been there to create these incredibly powerful mesh networks. But the technology wasn't there, and that was the problem. In daily society, we always dream something, but we can't do it because the technology is not there. And we need these converging technologies to come together. And one of the most important convergent technologies that came together, that has come together, is how do we get the stuff up there, right? You know, we shared I don't know if you want to mention it now, but we shared a snapshot over the weekend, you and I, Josh, about the cost of sending a payload up, 10, 15 years ago versus the cost of, payload right now. I mean, do you want to make a comment?
Oh, yeah, it's incredible, isn't it? So basically, I think it was 1981, a space shuttle. The cost to send a space shuttle into space was $55,000. I've got it written down here. $55,400 per pound. So that's not a kilo. There's 2.2 pounds in a kilo. But today, with the Falcon
heavy lift,
it was $951 per pound.
So hang on, it's gone from $55,000 a pound, which is the weight of the spacecraft, to $900.
To $950.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, that's right. So this is the reality, right? I mean, again, what we're trying to stress here is that this is cool stuff, right? There's always been this really, men, we invent things, we create things, we dream things, and again, these buzzwords, these constellations have been around for, probably a decade, realistically. There's been projects like the Google Loon project, for example, that have tried and failed. So we wanted to do this, which is too expensive and wasn't sustainable. That's important as well. Putting a network up, a satellite network is X, but actually, can it be sustainable? Because as the demand for more and more data and faster services and different services come online, can we actually sustain the network? And that's part of this cool evolution. I think it's really important to stress that this is a combination. And this is why I think it's really great. We've got GEO, we've got LEO, we've got MEO, we've got 5G coming. When you put all this together, it just gives far better quality of service. It will improve the price point. It will make data more accessible. It will make us all connected. Again, that's my view based on the data that I see in front of me. But hey, talk about that convergent technology, right? I guess you've heard of Elon Musk, Josh. We had a debate. Did he invent PayPal, or was he just the commercial driver behind PayPal? And you were right.
He was the sales master, the grand
sales master behind PayPal. So, but he had a good influence in PayPal. That's one thing. Of course, he's definitely famous for Tesla, but he's also famous for something that is incredibly powerful, which is SpaceX. And I've got a video which I love, and I hope you guys can kind of work it out. It really is a vision. Something that we, only as a boy we could dream. The reality is that I think that this, hopefully it plays well. It says it all, right? So just bear with me.
And that landing burn has started.
Both boosters looking to be on track towards their respective landing zones.
Landing zones have started. Star boosters landing legs are deployed.
bonkers. It's bonkers.
Every
So
time.
it's very cool, right? Again, we've got to kind of hustle through this. And we could talk for hours on this subject alone, but basically, this is a rocket that can be reused. The payload is loaded with satellites or technology, not just for satellite technology, but for space exploration. Up it goes, deploys where it needs, and then lands again. Where before the rockets, billions of dollars were wasted. So again, a really cool way forward. I hope everybody kind of got that video, and I think we'll share that video anyways. You can get it on YouTube. It's not a big deal. But some of these networks, well, let's talk about networks that are coming. So you've got the OneWeb network, which is a LEO-based network. I think that's going to be, it's not just for the maritime user, it's for global connectivity. Lots of megabits of global connectivity, potentially low latency. I think it's going to be absolutely incredible. And of course, the maritime user will benefit from it. It's not been designed predominantly for maritime, but you'll get access to that. So that's pretty cool. Again, I just got a bit too fast there. SES mPower. It's a different play. It's extremely robust network. Again, it's a MEO-based network, lots of capacity, lots of really, really focused coverage. And it's a gigabit play, to be fair. So if you need lots of steerable beams, or you've got a particular enterprise that's required, definitely good for cruise, could be good for high-end leisure, could be good for all kinds of exploration. That is coming too, and that I think is entering CSI pretty soon. Oops, sorry, wrong way. And then, of course, we have to pay homage to the Inmarsat guys. I mean, these guys are cool what they do. They've got this incredible network. They do brand new satellite launches. They've got it bolstered by the HEO technology. So again, the point is, when you combine MEO, LEO, GEO, HEO together, you get a very, very compelling offer where you've only had one choice. It's going to be all meshed together, and it's going to give incredible connectivity, again, in my opinion. And again, when you bolster that with habits and productivity shoreside, then in the mobility space, I definitely think that's going to come. So between now and 2029, 57,000 new satellites. That has its own constraints, absolutely, in terms of congestion, but it's happening. This is a reality, because the converging technology is there. The data demand is insatiable. So we are going to think about new ways to protect that data growth. And also, how do we connect things and make our quality of life a lot better? So what? This is cool stuff. Thank you very much for the information. But how does it affect me, the maritime user? Well, definitely the maritime user already has a lot of cool stuff on board, but can't maximize and leverage that equipment because there is caps in terms of getting data from A to B. It's quite expensive and it has its own constraints. But just imagine where there's so much choice and quality of service. This is good data. Great ways of getting data from A to B. If we're using the fiber network, if I send Josh a WhatsApp message, it will go from me to London, to France, to California and back again, speed of light. But if we have these mesh networks, potentially it doesn't have to go that way. It can travel the fastest route. So it gives us another option of getting data from A to B, and it can give, optimize getting data from A to B. But again, fuel efficiency, we're talking about greener fuels. We're talking about health and safety on board, telemedicine, mental health, getting crew on board these days is pretty tough. And I think if they're so used to a way of life shoreside, eventually those demands will come to the maritime. And I think those demands are fair, because I think actually they will certainly benefit the ship owner in time. This isn't going to happen right now, but I think when that choice becomes available, all of those gizmos, all of those toys, all those ways to improve our business from an enterprise perspective, from a mental health perspective, from a health and safety, from a green perspective, I think it's just wonderful, personally, to be fair. Any comments there, Josh? I know we're kind of pushing the time.
I know we are, but I was like, we're definitely going to do this on time. It's not.
No chance.
I was going to say, so traditionally you'd look in terms of the usage of data, and it'd be like 70% of it would be for crew. I think by the way, perfectly input, it shows the purpose of why you need to have more smart shipping technologies, be it route optimization, be it remote control or diagnostics capabilities, and also like in terms of wearable tech for the crew, monitoring effectiveness, safety for crew members. No, this is our last slide. Carl,
by the way, Carl, the webinar police has joined, so we've got to be very careful. Carl, just one last slide. Basically, I've got to put a plug. We don't plug on digital ship. I think that's a great thing, and hopefully people have been informed about data demand, have a bit of fun, and also, to explain why Leo Mio. But of course, we're part of the ecosystem. And in 2016, we saw this happening. Our technology has been developed to leverage these different networks. So you don't have 10 DOMs on board, you can have one. That's the point. I mean, I always say in the past, you really shouldn't worry what's under the radar. But today you have to worry, because can my asset that I'm going to buy, which is expensive, can I leverage the network I'm on today, but potentially go to a network that's coming around the corner? So that's it. All done, Carl. We're all clear. Over time.
Oh, very good. Well, that's fantastic. All right. So now we're going into the question and answer part of the webinar. I don't see any questions coming in yet, but I've got a few, and we've also got a poll. But while you think of your questions, so this is your chance to ask two experts on where maritime satellite communications is going. Maybe I'll give you my first question before we get to the polls. I'm wondering what career advice you'd like to give, say somebody's working in maritime IT. So, in the past, it's been managing this very expensive, narrow pipe, but I guess they won't have to do that anymore, but they will need to keep up to date with different options and things. Just to think about it, should we bring up the poll, Vida? So we'd just like to ask the audience where you think you're going with, are you going to stick with GEOs, that's Inmarsat, or are you going to bring in LEOs and MEOs in your connectivity? You may have had LEOs 20 years ago using Iridium, but now we're talking about very different sort of, much faster LEOs with SpaceX and Amazon and other things. If you'd like to put in your answer there. And we've decided we're going to hold on the results until the end of the webinar, so give you something to to think about. But yeah, do you want to come back to this career advice question then? Maybe give one or 2 minutes each.
Well, career advice. I don't think I'm the person to give career advice, but
well, if you work in maritime satcom, so what skills will be most valuable in 5 years' time?
Well, so I've been doing this for almost 3 decades, realistically, and it's served me well. I've had a lot of fun, but it's been a little bit kind of flatline. So what's happening now is cool, right? It's really cool. There's lots of opportunity. But I think from an IT manager perspective, he shouldn't be worried. Obviously, if you look at this from an elevated point of view, it's like, oh my God, there's so much. So what do I do? What do I do? What do I invest in? I think the point we're trying to make is it will be okay. By the time it gets to that level, certainly the terminal manufacturers, which we are, part of, we've got to make it as easy as possible. That's in our DNA, right? As we progress over time, we have to make terminals better, faster, stronger, and simpler. And so definitely, even though there is choice out there, the ability to just get the best service. The service providers will do all the work for them, to be honest with you. And they will just, and the IT guys say, right, this is where we're heading. This is what I need to do. And then the SP will say, well, that's the best network for you. The key is, do I need to choose terminal A, B, or C? Our point of view is you don't have to, right? If you buy what we call our NX technology, it can go on a GEO, a MEO, or a LEO network, however that looks. So I think that gives the IT manager a bit of reassurance. From a career perspective, there's going to be loads of jobs.
Well, maybe, I mean, if you actually you make value for maritime IT, you don't actually want to hear this. You want to hear that it's going to be really hard and your skills are going to be really needed, I suppose. Maybe. So, what skills will be most needed?
I'm not a maritime IT expert, so I could be completely wrong.
I was going to say, so obviously, I can't really give any career advice on them, apart from do something you enjoy. But I speak to a lot. I've undertaken a new quarterly service where I've been interviewing technical teams and IT managers about the reasons why they pick their service providers and the parameters, what it could be. Is it in terms of price? Is it on data capabilities or bandwidth? Is it a case of integrating their technologies? I would say to the feedback I generally give it is there's a lot of excitement by these upcoming new LEO constellations. People are holding off at the moment. And I can see actually a tipping point in terms of, right, we're going to make some bold decisions and we're going to really take advantage of these new capabilities.
Okay.
Well, I mean, again, not to give a shameless plug, but obviously there'll be a lot of IT managers out there going, I'll just wait. Well, absolutely, but we've been smart enough to be involved in all of these networks, right? Because it's our obligation to do that. Whether we like it or not, we have to do this. And in 2016, we made a very, very conscious, bold decision, we stuck our neck out and we invested into technology that could leverage this. And we were actually very, very closely partnered with the operators, Inmarsat and all the other network operators, OneWeb, of course, SES as well. So we're close from a personal perspective too, right? So we've really kind of mapped it along the way to make sure their technology, whether they go right or left, we can support it because we land the traffic, basically, certainly from a maritime perspective. So I'm only being honest, Josh, to be honest, you know.
Oh, we've got three questions coming in. LP, I don't know if this is an anonymous question. So he's asking what happens when the networks are unavailable? Because in Inmarsat, obviously, reliability is a big thing for them because they're for maritime, but these other networks are not. Usman Tahir is asking about interoperability. I don't know what NGSO, I guess that's satellite operator.
It's non-geostationary orbit. So it's the LEO MEO stuff, yeah.
Okay, Martin Kaufman is asking about 5G. Should we, what that means? Should we take maybe all those three at once?
That's a lot.
I'll pick one of them if you'd rather.
That's a lot. So in terms of satellite, accessibility, I mean, to be honest with you, all the operators do an amazing job, right? You know, they put redundancy into the network. If you can't see satellite, if you can't see transponder A or satellite A, you can switch to something else. So that at that level, absolutely. And I think whether you're on a MEO, GEO, or LEO constellation, that's good stuff, right? They're good at this. So I think there's not a really big issue there. Obviously, you know, we want to give. There's going to be choice, and will there be the ability to roam between GEO, LEO, MEO? I don't know. In a perfect world, absolutely, we might get there, and certainly we'll be part of that party. But I think there's, you know, potentially, you know, there's the SPs do that; they do it really well, you know. And remember, some of the service partners, they will buy some of the operators and some of the service partners. They will have different networks themselves. They'll have GEO, they'll have MEO, they'll have. So you know, you might be able to leverage that. Together contractually, they don't want you to leave them, so they've got to make sure that you get the quality of service on their network.
Well, you're seeing this now, aren't you? Already, where you're seeing already hybrid solutions between Silver and satellite.
Yeah, and I think that's the way forward. Realistically, is to create these hybrid solutions. You know, I often say we're the arms dealer, and we absolutely have to. I know it makes you cringe that, Josh, but it's true, right? We have to make sure that terminal on board, which is an expensive asset, can land this traffic, right? How the operators and the SPs evolve their own networks is really down to them. But there is a lot of commonality between each network, obviously, because it's satellite, right? So it has to be kind of similar. But there's obviously proprietary aspects of it. I think the last question, I can't remember what the middle question was, but the last question about 5G, it's a whole different conversation. But again, in the spirit of, we saw at the start, that 99% of all data transfers over these fiber optic cables, right? And we haven't really elaborated too much on this, but that video was written in 2015. It was far easier to get cables in there, right? And of course, we've got greener issues going on. So, you know, potentially getting data over different ways, that 99% can maybe come down to 25, 75. So we mitigate the risk. 5G is definitely a big part of that, you know, certainly from an infrastructure or backhaul perspective. And I think 5G is, you know, we're surrounded by poverty. And I think it's not just famine, water, COVID in these areas. Communication, data is a valuable commodity, right? And so we have a duty as a society, an ecosystem, to try and get data to, you know, the hard to reach areas in Africa, etc. So their society infrastructure will so 5G, I really have to pay homage to what OneWeb, SES, Inmarsat, you know, Telesat eventually, all these guys are doing, plus 5G, because they're going to change people's lives, you know, without a doubt, you know, because it wasn't possible before. Now it's possible.
Oh, that's great. Well, there's two questions about interoperability from Usman Tahir and Siva Sankara Narayanan. And I suppose it's like we said at the beginning, there's potential downsides for shipping, which I guess all our audience are plugging their brains into here. So Inmarsat was focused on reliability, and often reliability is more important than bandwidth for shipping customers. So I guess these companies are not sharing bandwidth. They're ferocious competitors. You're not going to see O3B and SpaceX agreeing to interoperate one of them's down, are they?
I think we just rely on the skills of the service provider, basically, who buy this capacity. They create these boxes, this infrastructure. They buy our terminals, and they just provide a solution and say, okay, we will give you this quality of service, right? But I think what's important, and this is another separate debate, is I think the necessity of even better quality services going up, right? Because a lot of it has become mission critical, right? Telemedicine, clouded data, crew welfare from a streaming perspective, ability to talk to the families, has all become more mission critical. So I think these network and the SPs, I talk to the SPs, they are getting really good at this, making sure that the uptime is better, the terminals are better, everything's better because we're more reliant on it. A VSAT terminal 10 years ago, in some cases, I used to speak to ship owners and the TV was more important than the data, right? Well, we saw that potentially TV broadcast may go. So data and reliable data is going to be key, right? You'll be literally, no pun intended, dead in the water if you haven't got connectivity. So yeah, again, maybe we're far from that, and I'm sure there is a lot of conservative people on this panel, on this webinar, and I absolutely respect that. I'm just trying to project what I think will happen, because whatever we do, even though it's farther behind, whatever we create, invent, do, operate, how we live shoreside, and we live in a very connected world, which I think is a great thing. It has its own disadvantages. I think that will certainly happen in the maritime world. So I think, interoperability, reliability, maximum upside is definitely high on the agenda for everybody, because it's such a catastrophic issue if a vessel doesn't have connectivity. And by the way, talking about the digital ship, well, HHI, Hyundai, they were the first guys to actually bring the smart ship. And we did some data points during 2019, 2020, and they were able to operate far, far better than some others because of their connected vessels. So, yes, I'm sure people are going, I don't need that much bandwidth. And maybe that's true, but having the access to do it without any pain point and the capacity that's at the right price point, because capacity is expensive, that really could change everything. And I think that itself is a tipping point, right, Josh?
Okay, we've got about 8 minutes left, so should we take this last question now here?
Sure. There's just a couple of points I was just going to make. Sorry, guys.
I was just going to say, in terms of one of the big things at the moment is offering that flexibility in terms of your data limits and your bandwidth and capacity, and being able to predicting the future is tough. You don't know what's going to happen, and therefore being able to adjust your plans to have, look, there is that extra capacity there, and being able to do so is completely fine. And then also just going a little bit further back in our conversations, talking about satellite capacity. It's not unheard of for some of the satellite operators to share certain systems. So it's well known in terms of Inmarsat and Telenor, isn't it? And the Thor 7, and they have a strategic agreement. Sorry, there's a fly around me. I'm trying to dodge around it. That they'll share the capacity for that satellite.
Okay, so Raimo Walkie is a business engagement lead with Stena Reederei Group in Gothenburg. So he's asking the question I was hoping somebody would ask. What's this? He's saying low Earth orbiting satellites, when they'll be available for maritime, when the tipping point comes in 5 to 6 years. So I think he's meaning SpaceX and Amazon, because we've had low orbit satellites in shipping for a long time, but these are particular future ones. So when will they be available for maritime?
Well, there's a lot going on. Like I say, it's easy to do it now. OneWeb, Maritime Commercial CSI will be the end of next year. Obviously, they'll be doing a lot from a land and enterprise perspective between now and then, but maritime, full-blown coverage maritime, ended 22. It's not that far away, to be fair, if you think about it, right?
Yeah.
And SES will be probably, for the most part, a bit 6 months earlier, but again, two different kind of value propositions, to be honest with you. There's others coming. And of course, from an Amazon and Facebook's perspective, and again, this is just my point of view, they have seen the writing on the wall in terms of potential risk on those, congested networks. It doesn't really have to hit the tipping point. At some point, it might just slow down, or security could be an issue. So they've identified, look, we want to be secure, we want to give our quality of service to our customers or whatever it may be. So there's big corporations now looking at different ways to get data from A to B. And it's not just satellite, of course, 5G and LTE, etc. So, but it's coming, it's now, and I can understand people's reservation because they've heard these buzzwords for a decade. But as we kind of explored and hopefully, reassured people that because of the converging technology, you can do this with what SpaceX are doing in terms of the deployment, etc., and others will follow. it's a reality. So it's pretty cool, you know. Yeah.
Oh, we've got about 3 minutes left, and there's 2 interesting technical questions here. So Siva is asking if one satellite goes down, because one of the things with these LEOs is there's so many of them. If one satellite goes down, I guess nobody notices. And Isidore Ilbudo is asking about flat parabolic antennas, which we've heard about, I think, maybe more than 10 years, but somehow don't have. Is that, do you want to answer those?
It's a cracking question, to be fair, and I think it's something we should really keep our eye on. So, you know, like I say, I've been in the satellite industry, you know, for 30 years. I studied that at university, and we've always had parabolic dishes, right? And, you know, why has that not changed? It hasn't really changed that much. And, you know, flat panel definitely is something we've all aspired to. Like, you know, we've dreamt up the flat panel. And actually, when you get to a LEO-MEO network, that is something you have to have a lag and lead, right? Where you have to have 2 parabolic dishes, one tracking the current satellite and one ready to pick up the next one. So that for an onboard infrastructure, it's a bit more complicated, but it's not that severe, to be honest with you. Then that's where a flat panel can really pay dividends. So, you know, the ultimate goal, and in fact, we are investing heavily into flat panel development. There is some constraints, and I won't go into that. There's different ways to develop flat panel technology. Is it something that will come? Absolutely. But it's, you know, a good 5 years out in terms of even competing against a parabolic antenna. But it will start gradually. We've got the OW1, which is the very first flat panel for the OneWeb land infrastructure, which is pretty cool. And we'll build on that technology. And we do have a desire to make things as simple as possible. So if we can put a flat panel on there that can just track a lag and lead LEO-MEO and give the quality of service from a transmit and receive perspective, then definitely we'll do that. You know, that's high on our agenda, but it's difficult. It's difficult. So it might come in stages, but yeah, whole different. You know, if anybody's got any questions, reach out to me and Josh, and we'll try our best to kind of. But it's happening. You know, like I said, converging technologies is all around us, right? The ability to do things is faster and faster and faster and faster. And one of the constraints with flat panel was the cost of it. You know, from a phased array perspective, which is a very good way of having an efficient flat panel, it was the chipset cost, right? Each chipset is a small little tiny antenna. And that was a fortune, but again, through development, through desire, through need, through benefit, through potential ROI, that chipset cost is coming down and down and down and down and down and down and down. But you still are limited by certain constraints. So, you know, I don't see parabolic dishes going out anytime soon. So don't think that's going to happen. And yeah, let's ask the question in 5 years. But we will introduce flat panels for use on certain elements. If you got low bandwidth potentially and LEO-MEO, it could be an ideal choice for you, and it will gain pace. Yeah.
Okay, I think we're coming to the end here, but should we bring up the results of the poll, Vida? And so how many? Oh, there we go. So 68% of the audience are thinking of going to LEO-MEO networks, already considering, means they're already thinking about it. 30% are not sure, and that's barely nobody is planning to stick with GEOs. Do you want to maybe 1 minute for final remarks, maybe? Yeah.
Well, I think that's a pretty good poll. It's pretty conclusive, isn't it, Josh? To be fair, I mean, you know, I'll be honest, I'm pleasantly surprised, really. Yeah, I think definitely that kind of validates what we're talking about. And in terms of a closing remark, I hope that we've potentially, you know, driven a few folk to think about certain things in terms of, you know, data demand. I hope we've brought a bit of fun to it too. You know, we have a more fun presentation, but it wasn't really applicable for this. And you know, I think, you know, a parting word from me is it's a bright future, and I think every operator, every service partner has a place in this world, and we have a duty to make it as clean and as simple and as, you know, great quality of service as possible for the end user, because that's what we're all about. To be fair, you know, we do try and think about what is the whole point, right? Yeah, we all make money, but we're in this for the right thing to do too, right? So
I think it's the most futuristic webinar we've ever done at Digital Ship. So I'll pass back to Vida for the closing words. Cheers.
Thank you, Carl. So you heard Jon Harrison of Intellian Technologies and Joshua Flood of Valour Consultancy having a nice dialogue on global data demand and how they see the future of satellite communications. Next Tuesday, we invite you all to learn about how maritime commercial communications are evolving. Sign up at webinars.digitalship.com. And now Digital Ship is signing off until next Tuesday. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye, 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 bye.
Pleasure. Take care, guys.